Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still with, of course, Pete Barnes. What was it you're called? A jabbering...
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm wrong.
Jibberjaws.
It doesn't mean I'm wrong.
I'm still with Jibberjaws, Pete Barnes. He does go on, doesn't he?
Yeah, because I'm right, that's why.
Yeah, of course you are. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Tory's going to win the next...
Yeah. Reform going to win the next election. Tell me a good
thing. That's right, dear. That's right.
Yeah.
Right, let's get back to the business that we're supposed to be dealing with. And we're still with Andrew Ewon, barrister. Have you ever lost a case, by the way?
It's funny you should mention that, Kevin. I've never lost a case.
He's never lost a case. He's never lost a case, but he doesn't like to talk about it.
I don't like to talk about it.
Even I know that.
Well, of course, he shouts it from the rooftops 24/7.
But in a posh voice.
You only win your cases because you've got a posh voice.
I think that's right. It's very good.
Well, there's not many working class barristers, are there?
There's a few, actually.
Yeah. I wouldn't hire one. Keir Starmer, he's the son of a toolmaker. He doesn't like talking about that either.
Very true.
So it took me some research to find out his father was a toolmaker, I'll tell you. Now, let's talk. This is an interesting legal conundrum, if you like. So there's this guy called Jake Fahri. Back in 2008, he got a life sentence. For killing a poor little kid, 16-year-old, well, I say little, he was a massive kid, he was called a gentle giant, 16-year-old Jimmy Mizen. Basically, Jake Fahri picked a fight on him in a bakery in South London. It all got out of hand, and this guy, Fahri, threw a hot Pyrex dish full of sausages at him, it hit him in the neck and severed his artery. He died. He got life imprisonment for that, quite rightly, if you ask me. Anyway, as in the nature of these things, his life sentence turned out to be about 15 years, So he went in 2008, came out in June 2023, on licence, of course. Now, since then, he fancies himself as a drill rapper. The BBC played his song, Dirty Game, and DJ Theo Johnson on BBC One Extra gushed, he really stands out. Well, the lyrics were all about, like, watching a man's soul, and I gashed him, and there he went. And it was all a graphic description of Fahri murdering Jimmy Mizen. That was what this song was about, so the BBC should never have played it. They had the temerity to say, oh, well, we have very strict editorial guidelines and policies before we let any content out. What they should have done is said, we made a mistake here, sorry, because that's what they did. But that's the BBC for you. So the BBC played this record. His mother, Margaret Mizen, was very upset about that, as you might imagine. Anyway, the point is that since being released, Mr. Fahri, piece of scum that he is, part of his licences was A, he wasn't allowed into the London Borough of Greenwich, and B, he must not talk about his crime. He must not boast about it. So, A, his song Dirty Game completely glorifies and boasts about his crime, his horrible murder of poor Jimmy. And B, he made a video for it in the London Borough of Greenwich. So we're not talking super criminal, are we here? He's thick as a brick, clearly. Anyway, so Jimmy's mum said, well, look, I've just looked at this video. This was only yesterday, and the authorities looked at that and said, well, that breaks the terms. Oh, have you seen this song? That breaks the terms. Mr. Fahri is now back in jail. Yes. He's been recalled to prison, so serves him right for being such an idiot. Now, what I would like to say to you, or ask you, Andrew, is this. A lot of people said, look, this guy, awful murder. Life sentence, great. Why was the life sentence only 15 years? And now that he's been recalled, now that he rode roughshod over the terms of his very generous, lenient release, can he now do life?
So it's very simple, and what happens is that I always say that trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback, and trust in the judiciary and the legal system was at an all-time low, which is one of the reasons they introduced the televisation of the sentencing.
Yeah.
And so judges could explain.
By the way, don't they go on when they're filmed?
But they're
I've seen them doing these sentences. You have too in real life. Trust me, that it's never as long as when they're on telly.
And what they're trying to do, though, is to explain to the system, and it's actually a formula. The Sentencing Council says that this is what you're trying to do, here's what you do for these cases, and murder is always life.
Yeah.
But what you do is you get what's called aggravating circumstances, which means that you have a minimum period, which might be a higher period if it's aggravating. Mitigating circumstances means it's lower. In this particular case, they said you've got 14 years. You have to serve your 14 years. But you then get let out, as you rightly say, on what's called licence. Now, what licence means, you're still serving your life sentence, but you're in the community and supposed to be rehabilitating and so on and so forth. If you breach the terms of those licence, you get recalled back to prison. So you're absolutely right on that sort of basis. What happened here in those two examples, he went to the borough, he recorded that, he clearly wasn't supposed to do that, and the abhorrent lyrics that we heard, and you mentioned some of them, seeing blood spilled, same floor he was left on, watched him melt like Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, sorry, watch him melt like Ben and Jerry's.
Sickening lyrics.
And they'll see the soul come out of him.
Absolutely
He was
sickening.
glorifying his horrible murder of that poor kid.
Sickening.
So he boasted about it.
And my heart goes out to the mother and so on and so on, and the family and friends who are just reminded of this. It's absolutely appalling. But it beggars another question, because rap songs, in and of itself, he's not the first rap person who's got criminal convictions. There's a number of rappers who have this. And if you look at the lyrics about women, about murders, about drugs and so on and so forth, there's a lot of those in these songs. And what the BBC would say is they're turning around, they said they didn't play that song, but they didn't know about his convictions when he was called 10, and they played it. They've now taken them off the playlist, so they won't do that again. And they also say that it's absolutely appalling. But it does raise that
should
wider
apologise,
question. Well, they should turn around and say, it's simple to say sorry and say, look, we're sorry for the offence.
We made a mistake, is what they should say. I mean, you know, the drill rap, I mean, it's got some pretty... they should have looked at the lyrics, but, you know, we all know what drill rap is about. But they didn't, and they didn't know about Jake Fahri's background, so to a certain extent, those are mitigating circumstances. But to start saying, their response was, Pete, see what you think about this, their response was, we have very strict guidelines and editorial policies before we put any content out. Well, you didn't this time, did you?
No, you didn't. And the boilerplate excuses just don't work here, because for me, actually, what I think this is the BBC like to elevate these kind of subcultures and these underground things, and to kind of speculate, kind of make them more significant and really shine a light on them. And I think that's what this was. You know, this drill culture is its own kind of subgenre, and it is people who don't really understand it trying to understand it and just making a complete mess of it. I think he's right that you should just apologise. I don't, but it should just be automatic for them to apologise.
But I think it's wider than that, though. I think it's wider than that, because if you look at the lyrics for a lot of these songs, they're all about the same thing.
Yeah,
and a number of rappers,
people.
but they are. And a lot of rappers have got criminal convictions. Yeah. You look at that sort of stuff. So the question has to be, in this society, is it right? So we've got to balance freedom of speech with incitement and causing offence and so on and so forth. That's the bigger question which we need to look at.
I think you're right. Sorry.
But I want to ask this, though. You know, what a lot of people are annoyed about is, you know, we hear, oh, you got life. Like you killed a kid, your life imprisonment. You know, some of them are back on the streets in 12 years, sometimes less. This guy, back on the streets in just under 15 years. He's still only 35 years old, whole life ahead of him and all that. So people get very angry about that.
And
it's deceptive. You know, it's stopped now, but for a long, long time, every sentence... so you go, tough on crime. This man is getting 20 years. You are sentenced to 20 years. What that meant was he was sentenced to 10 years. Yeah. All sentences were automatically halved, and yet for some reason the legal system wanted to tell, look at us, 20 years. No, 10 years. So there's this deception. He's getting life. No, he's on the streets 8 years later. This guy on the streets just under 15 years later. So what I'm asking you, Andrew, given that he has ridden roughshod over his very lenient early release. Could he do life now, please?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and this is about the optics on this sort of side. We need to restore trust in the justice system, and as I said, but the reason, the punishments, they always work on this basis. Some of it's to punish for the crime. It's supposed to act as a deterrent for other people, but also they're looking at rehabilitation of the offender. And this particular person was 19 when they murdered the terrible murder in Lee, as you mentioned. The question is, in normal situations, they want to try and see, can this person be rehabilitated? Which is why, that's why they sue it. And they then turn around and say, okay, after a certain period of time, we'll try to reintroduce you to society, but you're on licence, so if you do anything again, you're back in. And I think that's right. What we need is the public need to understand why this happens. You need to restore the trust and make sure that appropriate sentences are carried out.
Yeah, well, this guy, while he was still inside, there were allegations that he tried to sexually assault a nurse while he wasn't very well in the hospital, apparently. So, you know, there are other questions about why the hell they decided to let him out at all in the first place. So this is very, very murky. But Andrew, thank you very much. A very interesting half an hour on two legal cases, intriguing legal cases on both sides of the Atlantic. So thank you very much to the non-working class barrister and broadcaster, Andrew Eborn. Right, let's go to a break. Thank you very much to Andrew, and Pete will stay with me while we take a few calls. So back in a mo.